Welcome to the More You NoCo, bringing you conversations with insightful and fascinating people all around northern Colorado. Today we bring you a set of 3 related stories. I am your host, Ivan Wayne. Let's get going. In Fort Collins, an organization by the name of Neighbor to Neighbor helps people in the NoCo community with housing needs in many different ways. They help people navigate housing worries with classes, assistance with first month's rent requirements, and they even have their own communities for residents. They're a fascinating company, and they were originally on the More You NoCo way back on episode 14 of this podcast, represented by Kelly Evans, their executive director. Today we hear from 3 people who are directly involved with Neighbor to Neighbor. First, we will hear from Ward and Alex, who are both helped in their own journeys by this awesome organization. Then, we hear from Melissa, an employee and advocate for the wonderful mission of Neighbor to Neighbor. If you are a regular listener of the show, you know about our nonprofit of the month. For June and July, the More You NoCo has selected Neighbor to Neighbor. Any money made by our podcast, including your listener support, half of any of that will be given to Neighbor for the months of June and July. And of course, we would always encourage you to support them directly if you want to. More information on all of that is on our website at www.themoreyouKnoco.com. Here they are. I sit here with Ward, and I thought we would start off by first letting her kind of introduce herself and tell us about her story that led her to her experience with Neighbor to Neighbor and being here in Fort Collins. So where does your journey start?
Hi, Evan. Thank you so much for hosting me today. I'm very glad to share my story with you. And it has been a long journey for me and my husband. So we are really happy to share our story. I came from Iraq in 2009. I was a medical doctor practicing in Iraq. I came here to study a master's degree in Colorado State University as a Fulbright scholar. So I started my master's degree. I was living at the International House here in Fort Collins. And my husband, which at the time he came in 2010, he wasn't my husband, so we met here in Fort Collins. He came as an asylee. We met at the International House. There was a gathering, and as we were both doctors and both Iraqis, so we were introduced to each other, and then we were friends for like a few months. Then at the time, I was graduating from my master's degree, and at the time, I was thinking it's not a good idea to go back to Iraq because of all the events that were going on in Iraq and because of the security issues. So I was thinking I'll stay in the United States and try to get some paperwork done. We became good friends, me and Muthanna, my husband, and we decided to get married. And from here, I went to Florida for 1 year with my family after graduation. But when we got married, me and Muthanna, we came back to live here in Fort Collins. At the time, both of us were trying to get into the licensing test to be medical doctors here in the United States. And we heard about Neighbor to Neighbor. I think it's from the county as like affordable housing, because both of us were trying to study and get through life with all the challenging that we have. And we have Yusuf at the time, and then we get Talia as well, so 2 kids. So we get to Neighbor, and we applied. It was a wonderful program, and everybody was so helpful. And we got here. We were settled here. We didn't have to worry about paying expensive rent. We were able to study, and thanks God, I'm done with all my tests now. And I applied into medical residency and I got a position. So I'm starting first year in Michigan as a transitional year. And after that, I'll start my radiology residency. And in 5 years, I'll graduate as a radiologist.
Oh, heck yeah. So when are you heading out to Michigan?
So in 2 days, we are moving on.
Whoa.
Yeah, this Thursday. Yeah.
So this is kind of like a farewell interview then.
Yes.
That's very cool. And what was it like being a doctor in Iraq, and then you're a Fulbright scholar, and then you come to Fort Collins, Colorado?
So practicing medicine in Iraq is like a different story because of the situation of the country and like the limited medical personnel, the limited supplies. So practicing medicine in Iraq is really life-changing to doctors because you see different families, like multiple families who have shortage in water supply, in electricity. So it's not only being a doctor that you only treat your patients. It's how you approach your patients, how to give them education about medicine, about the importance of vaccination, about the importance of prenatal health. So it's simple measures that is for granted maybe here in the United States for people living in the United States, but in Iraq it's a different story.
So you got here, and then did you meet your husband before you all got involved with Neighbor to Neighbor?
Yes, we got married in 2012. And then we moved to live in neighbor to neighbor in 2015.
Yeah, and it just helped you all kind of get one foot going, as you got settled, because everyone who lives in northern Colorado knows about the rising rent here.
Yes.
And you said this was back in 2009, 2010?
I moved to the United States in 2009, and Muthanna, my husband, moved in 2010. We got married in 2012. And then we moved to live in neighbor to neighbor in 2015.
Right. And then they helped you. And then eventually, do you still live here? Did you end up moving out? Or what did that look like over time?
So since we are moving to Michigan, so now we are leaving neighbor to neighbor. And we're going to miss everyone who works here, like Marty, Megan, the maintenance guys, Tony and Alan. They're all good people. They help you all over the time. Like Stephanie helped me with my personal statement when I was applying for medical residency because, English is not my first language. It's my second language. Stephanie helped me with my personal statement. She went through it and edited. And so they give you unlimited help. It's not only housing, not only affordable housing. It's like people who knows that if you need them for any reason, you can reach out to them and they will help you with.
So you found community here, not just a place to live.
Yes.
That's very neat. Mm-hmm. And why radiology? Of all the specialties in medicine?
Radiology is my interest since I was in medical school because I think it's used like your brain and your eyes to analyze the findings and then give an impression to the doctors who are clinicians to help them throughout their work. And it's not only one specialty. It goes through the different parts of the body. So you have to keep in touch with each specialty in medicine. So it's a dynamic field, I can say. It changes every day. There's a new modality of imaging every few years maybe. So yeah, this is and it's life-saving in many cases, especially emergency cases.
Had you ever been to Colorado before you became a student at CSU?
No, this is my first time out in the United States when I came here as a student.
And how did you find housing? Because I remember when I moved to Colorado, that was a struggle. How did you pick where to live, or was that kind of a hard process?
So it was 2009, and especially I wasn't living in Iraq, it was a challenge. So what I did at the time, I asked about student housing inside the Colorado State University. So I was connected to a lady who works at CSU housing, and I was able to say, okay, I live in this building. They did the rest. They found me a roommate at the time, and even the payment I couldn't pay because I didn't have a credit card or a card at the time. It wasn't something popular in Iraq at that time. So I paid it through Fulbright. Like they made the payment. I paid them back when I came here.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
And anyone who's lived on a college campus knows how pricey that can be.
Yes, it's very different actually, because you have to pay for the rent, and the utilities at the time was included with the rent, but it was pricey. At that time, I had like an income from my scholarship, so I was able to pay for that, but it's really, really different compared to neighbor, where it is affordable. So you pay part of like your income, depending on your income, that's what you pay.
Right. Mm-hmm. And have you all looked, I assume if you're moving in 2 days, you've already looked and scoped out housing options up in Michigan?
Yes, we looked over over the internet online, and we found a housing that is not very far away from the hospital that I'm gonna work at, and it's a very good area with a good school system for the kids. Yeah, but it's still very, very expensive.
One step at a time, right?
Yes.
And what would you leave people with listening to your story, Ward, and maybe they know about Neighbor to Neighbor, or maybe they don't? If you could leave listeners with one thing, what might you say?
I would say for people living in Neighbor to Neighbor, grab the opportunity and try to work hard into making more advances in your life, because it's a very good period of your life that you really can progress and you really work on your skills. That's for the people who are living here. And for the people who can support this system, I would say that supporting Neighbor to Neighbor is very important. A lot of the people who live here needs this time to work on themselves and to progress and to have better jobs so they can pay back to the community again. So yeah, it's like a supporting system. We support each other. One day I was supported by all the funds from the people who give donations maybe to Neighbor, and maybe in the near future I'll be able to do the same and help more people. So it's like a chain of reaction.
Well, Ward, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Am I supposed to say my last name? Did I already mess it up?
No, you're fine. It's recording, but no, you. So I sit here with Alex. What was that? Did I catch you off guard? I was thinking.
You're fine.
And I want to first introduce her and then give her a chance to tell us about her background story and what brings you to Neighbor in Fort Collins today.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Brunswick, Georgia, and then I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee for the graduate program at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And then I graduated there with my PhD in anthropology and had an opportunity here to be a postdoctoral researcher here at Colorado State. And so we had to make the move out here to Fort Collins, which seems to be a lovely area.
It certainly is. And it seems like everyone in the world has figured that out at about the same time, right? With all the influx of people, which might lend to the skyrocketing, and skyrocketing might even be an underwhelming phrase, for rent prices here in Larimer County and Weld County and all of northern Colorado. And so I assume that boom in price is what brought you here to Neighbor, or...
Yes, absolutely. So the housing market here in Fort Collins was absurd, in my opinion. Coming from Knoxville, Tennessee, our rent there was about $550 a month, which I know people here are always shocked to hear that. So
for like a 2-bedroom, or
for a 2-bedroom house with a huge backyard. So that's a big difference from what you would see here in Fort Collins, where it seems the average rent maybe is around $1,500 a month. I could be a little off on that. A huge difference. So at least it was about a third of the price in Knoxville. And, our rent was a little lower than maybe some other people's rent. In Knoxville, you're probably looking at housing prices averaging there around maybe like between $600 to $900 a month. And going from that to now, anywhere from $1,400 to, I don't know, $2,000 a month, depending on what you're looking at. And you could get it pricier if you wanted a beautiful house with a huge backyard. So
you have this postdoc program coming up. You're about to move to Fort Collins. When did you realize housing may be a difficult battle?
Well, I thought housing might be expensive in general, just moving west. We have some relatives out in California. We have relatives in the Bay Area and in San Diego, and they are dealing with ridiculous housing prices out there. And I've heard so many people tell me that they plan to move to Colorado just in Tennessee who had no plan, no job that they, planned to actually go to and had no idea about the housing prices. It was just their dream to go to Colorado. So I just assumed that you guys had a huge population boom recently. And that assumption seemed to be pretty correct. But then when we were actually looking at places to rent, they were really high. And there were also few options. So there were limited options and high rent prices.
Competition is fierce out here. There are so many stories. We've even had people talk about before on the show of just nightmare stories where anytime you want to move into an apartment, they said, well, it's available 2 weeks ago. Like if you're not ready to move in today, you might lose it. And houses that go on the market for 48 hours and they get like 10 offers, just absurd amounts of competition.
Yeah, exactly. We actually experienced that. The same day that a house posted, we toured it via Skype, and someone right before we put in our application that day, and someone had already had in an application and rented the house. So
wow. And so how long have you been here in FOCO now?
I've been here for 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 nice weeks of snow to hail to rain to sunshine. So
yeah, you picked quite a month and time to be out here in NoCo to start. And so how did you even figure out or find out about Neighbor to Neighbor?
So I actually received an email from, I guess, maybe Human Resources Department at Colorado State University informing us about different benefits that we may have access to. And I think one of them was maybe the CARE program. And then under that, they had links to Neighbor to Neighbor. Mm-hmm. And so under that link, it then had all of these different things about housing and how there may be benefits that I could use, like first month's rent assistance, which is what actually came to Neighbor to help us out with.
Right. And that was like one less thing that you had to stress about, at least right from the gate, moving here, and getting settled before you start your program.
Oh, yeah. It was wonderful because it wasn't even just the high rent, because we knew we could actually cover the cost of rent once we were here and I was set up in my new job. It was just more of the cost of moving that was going to, because to move and the fierce competition that you were talking about, you had to put down a security deposit that was the same amount of your rent. And then you had to put down first month's rent and last month's rent. And then we had to put down like a pet deposit and all of this stuff that added up to almost, I think, about $4,000. And so it was just like an insane amount of money coming out of a graduate program where you literally make nothing. So that's like the plight of grad school. You make, $0 basically, just enough to live off of, no savings.
Yeah.
And then moving out here where it costs a ton to live and you have no savings to actually help you out with that move or transition.
Yeah, people here, you have a PhD, you went to a master's program. So I feel like in some people's minds, this dial kind of turns over and they think, well, wait a minute, aren't these people, aren't you highly educated? And they automatically think, big pockets, big bank account. But grad school starves you. There are programs that help you pay, like you said, for your degree, but you're just getting by. And coming out of programs, it can be so difficult to transition. I think that's one thing people don't think about when they consider higher education. It's like, put yourself back at 21 for people who've graduated from college and think about how many resources you had stepping out of senior year. Well, people have had to make that work for twice or triple as long as they're trying to get through school. And some people have families and children, and it's like, oh my goodness, that is tough. And education also makes you bounce around a lot. I mean, you mentioned 2 moves just in your story here alone. Some people end up having, depending on how many different parts of their education they got in different places, they could end up moving 5-6 times. And it's a lot.
Yeah, actually kind of questioning what's up with the graduate school here in Fort Collins. I don't know what their stipends are. So we actually get a living stipend, to make our way through grad school where you're paid as like a research assistant or a teaching assistant or whatnot. And you can cover the costs in Knoxville, but it can be rough, especially if you have a family or something like that. So I'm kind of wondering what the stipends, if that's actually meeting the needs of people here in grad school. I have no idea what their stipend is compared to someone in Knoxville, Tennessee, but I doubt it's that high.
That's true. So I'm in a PhD program right now for educational psychology, and I kind of went on the road to look at multiple programs, and I can say that the cost of living in Kansas and northern Colorado are not the same. And yet the stipend was roughly about the same between the two schools. And those are just two that I visited. But that was kind of like a wake up that thought, wow, regardless of cost of living, I could end up being paid the same. And that is, that's very sticky when you're looking at, well, I'm going to bring in X amount, but this is how much it's going to cost for me to live and to go grocery shopping. And it adds up very fast.
Yeah, you're paying for your house on that same stipend, so it can be difficult.
Is there anything, or what one thing might you tell people, listeners out there, anything about your story or your connection to Neighbor?
I mean, I would definitely suggest that people check it out. I mean, there might be some advantages, benefits that they could actually utilize in their own living situations.
And so what is tomorrow for you? Unsure? Next steps?
Oh, yeah, I have no idea. Right now, I'm just, flowing through that postdoc just started, so got a while to go with that research, and hopefully I'll be in the same house during my time here at Fort Collins.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, I sit here with Melissa, and she is an employee of Neighbor to Neighbor. It looks like that you've worked here for about 6 years now.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll start with, how did you find Neighbor to Neighbor, and how did you come to work here?
So I started at Neighbor to Neighbor in 2012. I was moving back to the area from New York City and saw a job posting for a position at a Neighbor to Neighbor position at the Murphy Center for Hope. I was very drawn to that position and really excited about that opportunity. And so I applied. I had my interview the day after I came back from New York, and the rest is history. Been here ever since.
Oddly enough, you're not the first person on this show to leave from here, go to New York, and then come back. So what was the impetus for all of that?
After I graduated from CSU, I did a year of service in New York City. After that, I had all of my professional contacts were in New York. And so I stayed there to get a little bit of experience under my belt. But when push came to shove, I just love Northern Colorado. My family is around here. The culture, everything about it was just, I knew that it was going to bring me back.
Do you miss anything about New York?
I miss the food mostly.
The food.
The access to good, cheap food. Yeah.
And so you've been back here for 6 years?
Yep.
Is this the job that you had when you came back?
Yep.
Okay, and what do you do here now?
I'm the program director for our housing counseling programs. And so our housing counseling programs range everything from homelessness prevention programs through home ownership.
When you discovered Neighbor to Neighbor, what made you realize this was going to be the job that you took coming back to NoCo?
So I really believe in the depths of me that housing is really a human right. And previous to this, I had spent some time working at the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless as well. And so I had some experience working in housing and homelessness, and just really knew that that's where my passions lay and insofar as what I wanted to do for work. And so this was a great opportunity to be able to take my passion and pair it in my job every day.
And were there any big surprises, or is this job in line with what you thought it was going to be? How is it now that you've put 6 years in here?
I think a lot has changed in 6 years. When I started at Neighbor to Neighbor, it was not uncommon to be able to find a place to rent in Fort Collins for less than $700 a month. Since then...
I dream of a day.
Right? The rents have just skyrocketed since then. And so it has become so much more challenging for folks to be able to find, affordable housing in this area. And so we've had to really adjust and try to figure out a way to, really serve the needs of the community in that time.
So you have this influx of people moving in, right? And that draws up prices. And so if you're a resident who's already here, you're in two buckets, right? Or, there might be multiple buckets, but my mind instantly thinks of two. You either own or you rent. If you currently own and the prices start bubbling, then hey, it's a great day to be here and I'm going to watch my equity go through the roof.
Yep.
No pun intended. If I'm renting, things get harder by the day because
Absolutely.
I'm here. I live on the same block. My kids go to the same school and yet my bottom line increases and increases and increases because where I happen to live is popular.
Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of folks who come to us, saying that their landlord increased their rent by $300, $500 from their last lease agreement. For most folks, that's just not doable.
We've heard from 2 stories previously on this episode, and I wanted to ask, what are some of your impactful and meaningful moments in this job? And just the stories you've got to connect with. I'm sure you could fill a week with engaging stories and good memories you've had. But
yeah, one that really comes to mind for me was one gentleman who I worked with several years ago who was a veteran, and he had been living in his truck for many years. And he came to Neighbor ready to make a change and ready to find some stable housing and move forward with that. We worked together really closely to help him find that stable housing. And when he moved into that housing, he was just so proud and so excited that memory has really just stuck with me for so long, that he worked his butt off to be able to make that happen. It was not an easy path for him to find that home. But once he had it, he was able to have so much pride and so much, just excitement for what lay ahead. Whereas before, it was always unknown for him.
So you all help people with housing costs, and you also help them with other things too, right? There's a community feel here. There are courses and classes, and I think you're like a holistic betterment for NoCo residents.
Yeah, we really believe that, helping people have opportunity and access to stable housing is the foundation for success. And so, being a part of building that foundation for the people who live in our community and for our community as a whole is a really, great thing to be a part of.
You mentioned the market has gone up, has shot up leaps and bounds since you started here. How have you seen Neighbor to Neighbor grow or change in the 6 years you've been working?
Neighbor to Neighbor has had to change a lot in that time because of the market. We work in an area that we have to be responsive to the needs of the community, and the needs of the community have changed drastically over that time. So our programs have changed to be able to try to meet those needs. We've increased the amount that we assist with for our rent assistance programs. We have introduced other programs such as Home Share, which is a program where folks can use a room in their home that they own and rent it to someone who's looking for an affordable housing solution in our area. So we've really had to be innovative in trying to help be a part of the solution to the affordable housing crisis in our area.
As we wrap up this episode for now, is there anything else you'd like to say to listeners out there who may or may not be familiar with Neighbor to Neighbor, or they have kind of a drive-by understanding of what assisted housing is? What would you leave with people? It doesn't have to be one thing either.
I think just that, Neighbor to Neighbor is really here to, be a partner for anyone on their path towards a stable home. Opportunity and access is such an important piece of that foundation of a strong community. Wherever you are on that housing continuum, whether you're experiencing homelessness or, experiencing instability in a rental, or you're looking towards purchasing a home, or potentially, you own your own home and are at risk of losing it to foreclosure. Wherever you are in that housing continuum, we have experts who can really help you to navigate that process as you go.
Well, thank you, Melissa, for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the work you do here at Neighbor to Neighbor.
Thank you.
There's a reason you all are the first organization to be on the show twice. And thank you for your time, and thank you for all that you do for people here in Northern Colorado.
Thank you as well.
For more about this podcast or our other guests, visit www.themoreyouKnowco.com. We have had so many wonderful conversations, you have to give the other episodes a shot. You never know what you're going to find. Thank you to Trevor for mixing and editing all our episodes. Thank you to Kelsey for our awesome logo and artwork. And Russell Isaac Long, my man, and guest of episode 67, is responsible for all our music used here on The More You Know Co. So grateful for you, my friend. We will be back soon, listener. Who will it be? What the heck are we going to discuss next? Until next time, peace.